Amen.
Let me know when we're ready, sir. It's 6:30 on the dot. Are we streaming?
Yep.
All right, it is 6:30. Today's August 10th, 2021, the special meeting. I'm gonna call to order. The special meeting of the board is now called over, like I said, roll call. Who is here to do call the roll?
I can in Angie's absence.
Okay.
Ms. Tribble,
Here.
Dr. Payne,
Here.
Dr. Murtada,
Present.
Mr. Biederman,
Here.
Pastor Robinson,
Here.
Mr. Bixby,
Here.
Judge Salinas.
Here.
You have a quorum,
All right.
Mr. President.
I do recognize the quorum. We will go to number 3, the Finance Committee, and I will turn it over to our chairperson, Dr. Payne.
Okay, we're ready now to call to order a special meeting of the board. It is a public hearing, and we're going to start with you. Is that correct?
Yes, before I do that, I need to officially convene a public meeting. Okay? Good. All right, I'm going to officially convene a public meeting. I will now, okay. All right. To consider amendments of for the public meeting to consider amendments to the finance parameters of the project for Benjamin Harris and Glendale Branch Facilities Improvement Projects. This is the first consolidated public hearing concerning amendments to the finance parameters of the post for Benjamin and Glendale Branch Facility Improvement Projects and regarding the amendments and restating preliminary determinations and additional appropriations for the Glendale and Fort Bend projects. This consolidated public meeting hearing was advertised in the Indianapolis Star and the Court and Commercial paper on July 30th, 2021. All right, Dr. Payne.
Okay, the public meeting is now called to order. EJ?
Thank you. Baker Tilly, Bellevue Gray from Baker Tilly is here with us, and she is going to go over some of the parameters of the bond issues or the restated and amended bond issues for the Fort Bend and the Glendale projects. As we briefed you guys at the last meeting, we are, due to the delays and due to unanticipated rise in costs and the cost of materials and labor, we have had, the budget for these projects have reached, have gone above what was previously authorized. So we need to reauthorize and go through the whole process again of bond issues in order to issue a new. And so Bellevue can go over what the parameters are for the new.
Thank you, Jay. Good evening, members of the board. My name is Bellevue Gray. I'm a partner with Baker Tilly, and I have my colleague Jason Tansel with me as well. I'm going to walk through some information related to the proposed financings, and then also talk a little bit about the impact to taxpayers. This slide here shows the library's current outstanding debt service payments, and you can see that the bond, all of the authorized bonds of the library are fully repaid by 2030, with quite a bit of capacity coming on in 2022 and thereafter, which, based upon growth in the library's assessed valuation, has allowed it to pay debt off much more quickly than has been authorized, which is, decrease the overall interest expense over the life of the bond. So we see a very rapid repayment on all of the debt the library has issued. This, I have 2 slides that are summarizing the proposed bond issuances. The first slide here is related to the amended and restated projects for Glendale and Fort Bend. Sure.
It is in your packet. It's in the other one that has the full board, yes. And then
Page 3, starting with Baker Tilly, and then you see.
Thank you very much.
You found it? Oh, no worries. No, thank you for stopping. So this slide right here shows the proposed Glendale and Fort Bend projects with the updated borrowing amounts, as you can see here, at 14.85 for Glendale and 13.66 for Fort Bend, we're estimating a repayment term of about 5 years. And the authorizing documents for these series of bonds will be 8 years, just to provide the maximums in the legal documents. And as a point of reference, when the bonds were originally authorized in 2014, they allowed for a repayment of up to 15 years. So again, because of the growth in assessed value and the management of the library's tax rate, we're able to pay them back much more quickly. The estimated maximum interest expense here is 1.47 for Glendale and 1.35 for Fort Bend. And that is based upon a conservative interest rate of 3%. Bonds that are selling with that 5-year repayment are really selling, in the 1-ish% range today, maybe even a little less, depending on. So we did build in some cushion there. And again, when the bonds were originally authorized in 2014, we were at that point in time estimating interest rates 6 to 7 years into the future. So the interest rates we used at that time were much higher than the 5% range. So we're in a much better spot interest rate wise as well, which further supports the quicker repayment structure. We're showing here that the library for many years has maintained a debt service tax rate of 3.18 cents. And so the issuance of these bonds would still maintain that strategy of the library. And the last 2 rows here, as required by statute, required to just provide information on the current and proposed debt as a percentage of assessed valuation for the library, and also for all direct and overlapping debt. Those percentages are shown here. And I should also note that each of those percentages are really looking at each of those bond issues individually. That's the way it's prescribed in the legal documents. Any questions on that? All right, the next set of approvals for proposed bond issues are related to the energy conservation and district-wide long-term capital maintenance and equipping bond projects. And there are 2 series of bonds that are under consideration, each at $5.575 million. And we're estimating a repayment term of approximately 2 years. And the legal documents allow for a repayment of up to 5 years. The interest expense, as you can see here, is a little under $217,000, also based on a 3% rate. I would expect that the interest rate will be also, if the bonds are approved, very favorable on those as well. And the change in tax rate would still be at that 3.18%, or excuse me, 3.18 cents. The last slide here then shows the payments of the library, both the existing and also the proposed bonds. And the line graph there also shows the estimated tax rate of the library. And you can see there is some decrease in the rate over the next few years. And that really will just provide the library with additional flexibility down the road to have, to look at issuing bonds for other projects that have yet to be identified while still maintaining that overall tax rate. That's all I have.
Well, if not, I'll have Jeff walk through things. From Morrison Thornburg, and he's going to talk about the legal process.
Thank you, EJ. Thank you, members of the board. It's a pleasure to be with you this evening. I'm Jeff Quackenbush, a partner at Barnes and Thornburg. We serve as your bond counsel on the projects and work with Mr. Scott as your general counsel on matters as well. The public hearing this evening is just on the first part of the presentation. So just with respect to the Fort Bend and Glendale branch project financings, we will come back and actually have a public hearing on the smaller bond issues at your August 23rd meeting, and that will be advertised in the next week or so. But tonight, what you're supposed to do after this point in time, when I summarize the financing and the calendar for you, is to open it up to the community and see if anyone from the community wishes to speak on any of these 2 financings and 2 projects for Fort Bend and Glendale. The couple things that I would like to point out from the financial parameters, not only are you able to do this because of the growth in your assessed value, but because of interest rates being significantly lower than what we anticipated when we first approved these back in 2014. In fact, then we were authorizing the interest rates to be around 5.4%. As Belvia said, they're going to be anywhere between 1% and 3%. So your interest cost back then was projected to be around 4.1 to 4.2 million per bond issue. Now, even though you're borrowing a little bit more, the total interest cost is around 1.3 to 1.4 million. So you're saving a significant amount of money over what you anticipated back in these rights back in 2014.
That's why the term is less, and we could get more aggressive. We could be more.
Yes, sir.
aggressive with repayment.
Absolutely. Yes, sir. In addition, the fact that the projects are coming in more than anticipated, I think these were originally slated to be done in 2000 or start in 2019 and 2020, but because land acquisition was delayed for various reasons, and because of last year experiencing the COVID pandemic that put everything basically on hold. I think that's what's caused some of the cost escalation. And then finally, just some of the projects we're seeing, you're not alone with your cost escalation. I get other projects in the last 30 days that are looking at anywhere from 15 to 30% above construction drawing estimates from a month ago. So this is across the board what we're seeing right now. Unfortunately, that's something that doesn't look like it's going to go away here in the short term. So I think you're wise to consider these options of going forward with the financings now because of interest rates being so low. That's offsetting any of that increased cost that we otherwise are experiencing. Tonight, after this public hearing, we'll have one more public hearing on these matters on August 23rd. If the board, after that public hearing on August 23rd, approves these amended and restated resolutions, we will then publish a notice in the local paper regarding each of the projects, making it known to the public that we did make these preliminary determinations on August 23rd. We then have to wait 30 days during which the community can comment on that. If the comment is favorable or there's no comment at all, then we will proceed to go to the City County Council for approval of those starting at the end of September through October. And then it's anticipated we would price these bonds in November and close them in December. So it will be a slight delay in the project timeline from what we originally anticipated, but not significant as long as we don't receive any sort of negative comment.
So the rate could change slightly between now and the age.
Yes, sir. We've seen, and I don't want to speak out of turn here, but we've seen interest rates a couple months ago that were with U.S. Treasuries being up almost close to 2%. Now we're back at U.S. Treasuries being at about 1.3, 1.2%. So you're seeing some volatility in that, but still you're not seeing going from 1% to 5%. We don't anyone anticipate that in the next 6 months. But
And the library has always, because it's a frequent, it's a known name in the market and has very excellent credit rating. There's always a lot of interest in the bonds of the library. And so the bids are always very, very competitive that are received.
And then also to piggyback on that, the other thing we are seeing as well is that while people are not willing to lock into these low rates for long-term bond issues going out 15, 20 years, we are seeing a lot of interest in the 1 to 10 year bond range, bond maturity range, especially. So we think that those interest rates will stay very close to where they are now, maybe a little bit up or down from there, but that's still very fair. So
My question, given what you outlined there as far as the land acquisition process and the pandemic and the cost going up, this is what our CFO and you recommended, right, as our best course of action.
yes, sir. Given that these projects really to do, and I am speaking quite a bit out of turn here, but from what I'm understanding, the scope of these projects is relatively modest right now. And so to try and reduce the scope of the projects even further below the 20,000 square feet would really start to dramatically adversely impacting the programming that could be done at those branches to make them similar to what is going on at your other branch facilities. So I don't think you have an option of reducing scope. I don't think it's probably a good option to wait because I don't think anyone is thinking that project costs are going to go down significantly and you start to expose yourself to interest rate risk when interest rates are, I haven't seen them this low in 30 plus years I've been practicing it. I think we've seen the previous 1960s that would have rates this low. So I think this is your best course of action to proceed with these projects, given that it's tax rate neutral.
I have one question real quick. So I know that some of the scope was reduced initially because of some of the cost increases. I know we're looking at like a 5-year bond insurance or repayment on this one. Say if we would have went 6 or 7 years, I know you said 1 to 10 was the premium ideal rates or whatever. So if we added back in some of the stuff that was reduced initially, how would that impact the overall, like, request for funding for both of these projects, since we already reduced the scope? You know what I mean? Like, what's the repayment if we did keep that, or if we went back to the initial drawing board on it?
That would be, I can tell you from a financial standpoint, it probably wouldn't have any negative impact to you. But what it would do is in time, because now you've got those documents already bid out there and on the street, and you've got bid prices. If you now go back and expand that scope to add another 5,000 square feet or so, some of these may not even be able to accommodate it on the site that you finally ended up with. I'm not sure if that's the case or not, but yes, because some of them we had anticipated larger sites, we had 25,000 square foot. But if you would decide to do that, you'd probably be looking at about a 6-month delay to get those documents redrawn. What might work out better for you, given that you have such a short repayment here, is if you find after you're in these facilities for a couple of years that you need that extra 5,000 square feet, you might be able to look at adding that on and doing a small bond issue to do that addition, and that would be much more cost effective than waiting 6 months to try and redesign those projects.
Additional questions from the board?
So at this point, you would need to ask if there's any questions or comments from the community.
All right, I am going to at this time ask if there's anyone present that wishes to comment from the public. See, none is here. I will entertain a motion to close the public hearing as to this item only.
So,
There's a second.
Second.
Discussion. I have been told by council that I can do a voice vote. All those in favor of closing the public comment section as to item B, public hearing section as to item B, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, same sign, or I say nay. All right. That's all we have for B. Huh? Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Great job. Like those interest rates.
All right, we're gonna go, Dr. Payne, if you want to introduce item A. All right, before we do, I am officially going to convene a public meeting, public hearings as to item A, which is the budget, library, the 2022 library budget is advertised on July 31st and August 6th.
But the hearing is now open.
Thank
DJ?
If you can tell us which page you're going to start on.
That's,
It is on at the beginning of your packet. Start at the very beginning.
Look, shoot,
Okay.
Are you there? Let me see, hold on. I'll get it for you. We have two documents. You have your budget book. And then I've given you, with your main packet, it's on the second page, starting on the second page. Okay, so this is a public hearing for our 2022 budget. We brought the draft of the budget to you guys at the July board meeting. This budget is substantially the same as that budget we presented to you at July or in July. We have a few changes since then, but not anything significant. We always like to start with our mission. Keep in mind what we're doing this for. And so I just want to read our mission. The Indianapolis Public Library enriches everyone and strengthens communities by inspiring lifelong learning. Also want to just show what our framework is, for, I guess, for our public, more than for you guys. Our CEO reports to our board. She's the only employee of the board. And then reporting to the CEO are 7 functional areas. The biggest of which is our public services area, which supports all of our 24 branches. And then you can see what the rest of these other ones, finance, election management, all have sections to them. But like I said, our biggest area is our public service. Then I also wanted to highlight our key budget dates. So as you guys know, the public library is a municipal corporation of Marion County. And so we're subject to budget approval from you guys, the library board, as well as from the city county council. So the outline of our budget dates were in June. We went over high level assumptions with you guys. Then in July, we went over a draft of the budget. And then now today we're doing the public hearing for the public to see that what's in our budget. And then on the 23rd meeting, you guys will then adopt the budget. We'll then go on to the city county council, and then they'll finally adopt. We'll go through the municipal corporations committee. They'll have a public hearing, and then they'll, the plan is for them to adopt our final budget on August 11th. And then it goes to the DLGF, and they make sure that we've gone through the proper process for the budget.
PJ, anything major has changed since June 1st, June 12th, anything?
So there have been things changed since June 12th. Like at that time, we didn't know what our local income tax amount was going to be. So we made an assumption. We didn't know what our net assessed value was going to be. So we made an assumption. We didn't know what the growth quotient was at that meeting. Now we do know. So there's some things that we know more now than we did.
Plug in. Better know.
Right. And I'll go over those assumptions. I also wanted to go over just briefly what our library funds are. So we have these 4 funds that we bring to you guys for budget approval. And those are our annually appropriated funds. But as you guys know, in addition to that, we have other funds. Some of them don't have to be annually appropriated, like our gift and grant funds. Those are determined by donor requirements and grant requirements. Then we have our bond issues that are appropriated once, and they're multi-year appropriation. So typically when we do this 2020, our annual budget, we're doing it really mainly for the operating, the debt service fund, the library improvement reserve fund, and the rainy day fund. So that's why you only see those 4 when we go through this process. So I just wanted to, you guys all have our 2021 through 2023 strategic plan, but wanted to highlight that and what our priorities were on that plan. Racial equity, partnerships, digital and technology inclusion, supporting local educators, reading and writing, health and wellness, literacy, and financial literacy. Okay, so this is a summary of those 4 annually appropriated funds and compared to what our budget was in 2021. So as you can see, overall, our budget is growing by 3.3%. And typically we want to stay under the growth of our growth quotient, which is 4.3%. So we're in pretty good shape. Our operating fund is growing by 4.7%. But we're still relatively in good shape there. And I'll talk a little bit more about the details later. Okay, so for our 2022 budget, we wanted to identify what those priorities were. When we went through the strategic plan, we identified some metrics, and some of them had dates to them. And so these are really pulled from the metrics that we worked on during the strategic planning So one was to increase the leadership in a cultural awareness, develop a culture of racial equity, strengthen our organizational framework. So we have identified 10 standard operating procedures that we want to have written. So things like strengthening our internal controls, and then we have other processes that we want to make sure we have documented. And then increase collaboration with schools. I know that we're already working on that, but we want to increase that collaboration. Then adapt library services and leverage technology to improve service to patrons. So an example of that is us applying for hotspots, is improving our internal technology so that we're more efficient. And so things like that. And we have a whole digital inclusion roadmap that we're working on. So, and then investing in our IT department as well. Retain and attract diverse, highly competent and knowledgeable staff. That also goes into that organizational framework, strengthening that framework. And then continuing to provide a welcoming, clean, safe, and accessible branch location. Provide clean, safe, and branch location. Okay, so for our budget challenges have stayed the same for the last couple of years. And our primary challenge is basically our expenditure growth, having our revenue growth keep up with our expenditure growth. So as you guys know, we are 80% relying on property taxes, 80% of our revenues are property taxes. Property tax receipts over the last 10 years have grown by 2.3% on average annually. And this includes the growth that we got from acquiring Beach Grove Library. So not ideal, because our budget has been growing by an average of 3 to 4%. And then the other thing that we're gonna encounter for the future is that our levy freeze amount, which is about 3.8 million, has capped out. And so we're not gonna see any growth in that amount unless something changes from the city. And then the last thing is what we always talk about is a lack of comparable share in local income tax code with other Indiana libraries. On the expenditure side, of course, our increasing personnel costs, as we know, salaries are increasing right now. And we do have a little bit of a plan to try to shift our range to try to keep up with the market. Increasing security costs. Now we're moving our strategy in terms of security at the branches, but it's still going to cost about the same. Meeting the demand of e-resources. As we know, e-resources are more expensive than physical books and materials. So trying to keep up with that demand, that demand is increased. And then, we have a high fixed cost. We have things that we have to do, obviously utilities, salaries, and we don't have a lot of flexibility to kind of shift gear and be innovative. So that is a challenge that we have. And then the final one is increasing costs of technology. So, as you all know, it used to be you could buy software and then you pay for maintenance. But now we're trending towards software as a service. So it's an ongoing cost. And so for us, that's presenting a challenge. For instance, in the budget, you'll see that we are moving from Outlook to Microsoft 365. It's a significantly higher annual cost for us. And so for us to keep up with technology, we're going to have to figure out how to pay for it. So those are our challenges that we have. I always like to kind of share what we do. So how do we serve? This is the library at a glance in 2020. We had 338,000 card holders. 36% of our population are card holders. Of course, we would like for the whole entire population to be card holders. 39% of the cardholders are active borrowers. And I'm not gonna go through every statistic on here, but you can see that our electronic circulation was actually pretty strong in 2020. But our physical circulation was 7 million, and I believe last year was 9. So it went down understandably significantly. And then,
I don't know if I'm the only one. I was thinking where e-books are more expensive than.
3 to 4 times more expensive.
A lot more. Yeah.
Yeah.
College students have to pay so much money for these ebooks, and then they have to get them over again, and the whole price of.
Yeah, it does, it's not intuitive that it would be more expensive, but it is. And then I wanted to highlight our community leverage, as we call it, support from our foundation at 2.8 million in 2020. And
That's for 1 year.
that's for 1 year. And so that's in grants and donations from the community. So people believe in the library, are willing to support the library. And then we had 357 volunteers. Now that's down from prior years because volunteers much. All right, so this is a overview snapshot of the 2022 budget. On your right, go ahead.
Just a quick question, going back to the expenditure challenges.
Mhm.
Can you say a little bit more about those high fixed costs? You said utilities, salaries, so you can't shift. You know, can you say a little bit more about what have we tried to do with that fixed cost?
Well, I think some of what we try to do is shift some of those costs into bond issues to kind of free up money in the operating fund. Other things we've tried to do is energy efficiency. So we've done lighting upgrades to try to reduce costs. We've put solar panels now on some of our new buildings.
And West Perry has a strong, I got you.
Right, so some of those things are things that we're trying to do to try to free up, to allow us to be able to be innovative and address the changes in the way library services deliver.
Thank you, I'm sorry.
No problem, please interrupt at any time you have a question. And then, okay, so this is a snapshot. On the expenditure side, we're anticipating or asking for $52.3 million budget. And we're estimating our revenues to be 48.9, basically 50 million. Now, I just wanted to note that although you see that this is a deficit budget, we always anticipate, we always budget conservatively on the revenue side. And then we always plan to underspend our budget. So I'll show you that on the next page as well. So this shows the actual versus the budget for since 2017. So the darker green or bluish green are actual expenditures, and then the lighter green are budgeted expenditures. So as you can see, there's a gap between what we actually spend and what we budgeted the past couple of years. Now, once we get Fort Ben on, that gap becomes smaller because we'll now add those operating expenditures for Fort Ben. And then the line that's on top is what our actual revenues are for 2017 through 2020. And then for 2021 and 2022, those are our projected revenues.
I have a question real quick, DJ. Oh, no, go ahead, you're good. No, I see exactly. What
Okay.
Thank
All
you.
right, no problem. All right, so a little bit more detail on the revenue side. As I said, we're projecting 50 million in revenue. I mean, I said 50 million. Yes, 49 million. 80%, as we mentioned before, of our budgeted revenue is property taxes. Our revenue this year grew by, or our property tax levy grew by 4.3%. That's a number that's determined by the state, as I mentioned to you guys before, and that's based on the non-farm personal income, the average of the last 6 years. We are projecting our circuit breaker loss to be at 18% of the levy. That's what it's been consistently now for the past couple of years. So we feel that's where it's gonna come in.
And the levy freeze amount, you said is around 3.8 cap.
Right. And that is property tax replacement with local income tax. And they capped it at that point at 3.8 million, unless something is changed within the state. Then our intergovernmental revenues, which includes financial institution tax, our vehicle excise taxes, we're projecting those to stay relatively flat. That's about 7.9 million. And then our fees, now we don't have fines anymore. So that's something that's different this year. Well, we also didn't have a ton of fines last year because of the pandemic, but now we officially are fine free. But we still charge for lost books. So we're projecting our lost book fees to stay the same. And that's about 115,000. And then for charges for services, which includes our printing, faxing, facility rental, cafe revenues, we get a commission on the cafe revenues. We're projecting, which might be a little aggressive in this case, that will stay the same as 2019 pre-pandemic. So we're keeping it flat. Typically, we would expect to grow, but of course, we had the pandemic, but we're expecting that we'll grow from 2020 because we were pretty non-existent. So we're staying flat with 2019. Okay. On the expenditure side of things, as I mentioned, salaries and benefits are our biggest part of our budget. That's 60% of the budget. I think we have in our budget approximately 473 FTE that we're accounting for. We're projecting salary increases of 2%. And here's where that 1% range shift is noted. So we're anticipating that we'll shift the range by 1% and we'll increase the salaries as well by 1% so that some people are not falling outside of the pay scale. Factored in here, or factor for an increase here, is Fort Bend branch staffing. Now, we've included it in this budget, but likely we won't have any staff. We won't have Fort Bend up and running in 2022. So it's going to be in that budget and it's going to be a savings for us. And then we've also, as I mentioned to you guys previously, increased the minimum wage for all positions except for pages to $15 an hour. And Curtis, you asked about how many people that would impact at our July board meeting, and it's about 96 positions.
I have another question. If we're saving with the Fort Bend project, with the staff, how would that impact? I know that we were looking at bringing on our own internal security personnel, or how many people is that reflected here within the budget for security versus how many we're getting out from G4S and all of that?
That's a good question. I don't have the exact number, but I believe we have 8 security positions, part-time security positions incorporated in our budget right now, because that's what we're planning to build this year. And then in terms of what we get from G4S, I don't know that exact number, but we're still probably planning to, at least as of this moment, we have a significant amount at the central branch location that's still being spent. But I don't know what the number is. I can get that.
You have full-time security, any full-time security?
Not on staff.
Not on our payroll. There are some people from G4S who have full-time assignments, but we have no full-time.
Remember, we've had an extensive discussion about how that role actually changes too.
All right, our supply budget, I tried to put in some pictures here to make it a little more interesting. But people always wonder why we have supplies of 1.2 million and 1.3 million. Well, everything goes in here, like I've said before, laptops, PCs, small furniture and equipment. And this significant decrease we have here, which I mentioned last time, is because we had an increase in 2020 because we had a major refresh plan. And so now we're decreasing, but it's not along the multi-year trend line, it's not a major, decrease. It's because we had an increase last year. Yes.
Are we gonna keep all the precautions we took in for the COVID stuff in all our branches, like the class?
I don't know, that's, I'm assuming we would. Jackie, you can answer
For
that.
the time being, it is our intention because it's not clear when we will really be in the clear.
And have we utilized as much of getting money from the feds as we can, reimbursement or stuff like that?
We are applying for a grant, for an emergency connectivity fund that's related to the American Rescue Plan. And we're planning to get hotspots and storage for Chromebooks. Other services and charges, that's about 26% of our budget. And I am sorry, I was rushing through this and I didn't refer you guys to the pages in the budget book. So I have this budget book that has all of the detail, and I've given you guys that detail before. But if you go to page 17, page 17 and 18 basically has our entire budget line by line. So you can see what it was in 2020. You can see what our 2021 budget was, and then you can see what we're proposing. So I'm just trying to do a snapshot on the PowerPoint here, but you have all the detail in the book. So in the other services and charges, if you look in the budget book, you'll see that there's a different number there. So the total on page 18, just so if you're looking at it later, you're not wondering why, that total is 16.6 million, but that includes our materials contractual, which is really our e-resources. I pulled that out to show our collection materials budget together. So what you're seeing on the PowerPoint is everything in other services and charges, less materials contractual. So as you can see, we're anticipating there are a couple lines here that we're anticipating increasing significantly. One of them is cleaning.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
Yes.
You're saying the other contractual services are the things that are tied to our
No, the materials contractual, that's on page
That's-
18.
Yeah, I'm right there with you.
Okay, it's about 3.3 million. In 2020.
Okay. And the other contractual services, those tie into what?
No, so the other contractual services are, we actually have the detail for that in here. There are things like, I'll find the page. Okay, so page 35. So there's just other things that we have contracts for. So sometimes it's confusing between that and consulting, but these are things like digitization, things like storage for our digitized items, things like our copier, contracts for our copier.
Like Rico, making sure that-
Rico, exactly.
Gotcha.
There's Communico, which is related to the calendar on our website. So there's other contracts that we have that may not be just professional services that we put in this other contractual.
And so the requested amount for 2022 and 2021 and the growth and the changes there, those are very minor.
Yes, for the other contractuals.
This is minor.
Right. So on the other services and charges, the places I wanted to point your attention to were cleaning. That contract is going out to bid. We built in an increase there because we know there's an increase in the labor market. And so we're anticipating that. And then we have professional services. That's primarily because of consulting as we try to implement the recommendations from the IT audit. We're gonna need some consultants to help us with that. And so that's primarily what that one is. And then we also have computer services, which is lumped into that final number there. But if you look on the detail, you'll see that it's increasing because of the move to Office 365. So those are the biggest changes in that category.
Hopefully we'll have any snow removal.
Hopefully we can save there, yes. That's always good. All right, and our collection material. So this is where I put that material contractual from other services and charges. Just to show you what we spend on collections: ebooks, audiobooks, physical books, magazines, databases, all of that. So, and we have some minor other equipment in here, computer equipment and capital. That's not, I mean, that's actually decreasing by a very small amount. So we're basically keeping that flat. Our debt service funds, as you know, our strategy is to keep our tax rate at that 0.0318 number. And so we have our three anticipated bonds for 2021, including Glendale, Fort Bannon, and the small bond issue you guys heard about this evening. Those projected debt services are in here. So with that, we expect to keep our tax rate flat. Just because we were talking about debt service, and that's what helps us to fund these new branches, we wanted to put in a fact that Westbury opened this year. We'll have half a year of operating expenditures for Westbury in 2021. We'll have a full year in 2022. We might get a little tighter there. You've seen this, Levy explained this. This is the same graph she explained, but wanted to show that we do have a long-term debt plan. And then the two other funds, and I'm almost done. Rainy day fund, as I've explained before, we just use this for timing in terms of our bond issues. So we want to be able to pay for our construction costs. And then when we issue the bond, we'll reverse ourselves. So this is an appropriation that we need just for that timing of bond issues. And then for the Library Improvement Reserve Fund, we are looking, this is just an estimate, but we are looking to upgrade our accounting software. And so we're wanting to set aside some funds for that. But right now, this is a rough estimate because we haven't even hired a consultant to see what.
A quick question, it's for some of the branches that are not as new as the new branches, where does the allocation of funds come to upgrade them? I'm thinking about like West 38th Street, Fallville, where does that fit into our plan?
So that doesn't fit into our operating fund, but we certainly can use those small bond issues. So we didn't actually go into the projects associated with small bond issues. but two of them are not the ones you mentioned, but we have Pike and Nora upgrades scheduled. And and we have Garfield Park. So those kind of upgrades will come out of our foundation.
Have we talked about those? I don't recall us talking about those.
I talked about them today at the finance committee meeting, but I have not talked to the full board about any edits. And in fact, I will give all of you guys a finance. We'll talk about it at our August board meeting as well. But I will go through it real quick just for everyone, since you asked the question. So 2 of the bond issues that we talked about this evening are small bond issues. And what we try to do is issue these small bond issues to kind of take some of the weight off of our operating fund. So the one that we plan to issue in 2021, we're going to plan to spend for our opening day collection for the Fort Bend branch. But then these bilingual children's computers in the branches, we're going to spend about $300,000 on those. And then the upgrade projects for Nora and Pike, we're projecting $3.5 million. And then we have just general facility projects at $660,000, carpet replacements, branch painting, lighting upgrades. And then for our second series, we don't have cost estimates, and these projects certainly can change. We can add to them. But right now we have solar panels on other branches to save on operating costs. We have the Garfield Park meeting room. We have a generator for LSC. And then the learning curve at Central, we're planning to do a refresh of that area. And then we're looking for a new door counter system. So that second series is not set in stone. Those are ideas of things that we do to help relieve the operating fund.
That's very helpful. Thank you.
And then, okay, so when we advertise, we tend to be very conservative in case there's a mistake somewhere in the net assessed value. So we used we're using last year's net assessed value, because it's lower and it gives us a higher tax rate in case there's a mistake there. And then we also are we put a high amount for our levy. So for instance, we only need on the operating fund, we put 50 million, whereas we need like 47 million. Yeah, 47 million levy. So that's why these tax rates are high. So as you can see, it's 14.9 cents here. The next slide will show you what we actually anticipate. So we actually anticipate, based on what we know our max levy is, based on what we know our certified net assessed value is, that our tax rate will be 13.33 cents, which is actually slightly lower than. And then this is just our rate history to show you where we've been. We've tried to stay steady since 2017. Our rate has stayed pretty much at 13 cents, 13.6 in 2017, and we've kind of gone down because we've been lucky enough to have good value. And then here's what you'll see in your resolution at the next board meeting. This is what we'll be requesting, as I mentioned. You'll see here our adopted levy will be 50 million for the general fund, which is our operating fund, but it's actually 47 million. But we're adopting. Same with our debt service. Any questions? Oh, I like this. I showed this to you a couple of times just to show you what your property tax dollar does. And here's the library.
You like slicing up that dollar.
I do. It's not that dollar. Well, I'll take any questions anyone might have. If not, I think we need to open it up for public.
Yes. Is there anyone present from the public that wishes to make a comment? We have none. I will now consider a motion to close the public hearing. Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion on that motion?
Just one thing, under the 22 budget priorities, we mentioned increased collaboration with schools. I like the language to express, not only with schools, but we have a lot of other community partners. And I like that reflected there. It's an important part of what has been built, those built relationships that you've been doing for so long. Great.
Yes.
Any other discussion from the board as far as our budget?
One other point, under adopting the library services and leverage technology to improve service to patrons, it's also the language of investing in the technology staff.
Investing in the technology of staff.
That's that, yeah. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that's fine. I mean. good with
Make a
that.
little bit more specific.
Any other comments from the board for discussion, matter or discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor of moving this to the full board? Actually closing the public. Oh, that's right. All those in favor of closing the public hearing, signify by saying aye. Aye. All opposed, nay. Hearing none, the public meeting is now closed. Is there a motion to adjourn this meeting?
So moved.
Second,
Second.
any arguments, discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Thank you, folks.
Thank you all. And thank you, finance committee members, for